Good evening, Council. Jonathan Britt, here tonight concerning Resolution 2023-33. As a resident of Lansdowne, I care deeply about this community and all who call it home. As a Christian pastor who believes that I am called to speak out on behalf of the dispossessed and against injustice in any form, I believe this resolution misses the mark. First, I want to affirm that I believe the intentions of this resolution were good and worthy. Surely we can all agree that no one should be targeted for their religion, race, nation of origin, or ethnicity, among other things. Our world has seen both the terrible consequences of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia for centuries, and again here tonight over Zoom on the things that we heard, the vile comments at the beginning of this meeting. This council and all the residents of this borough should strive to eradicate such hatred in our own hearts and in our own minds. Indeed, if you hate anyone because of your or their religion, you're doing it wrong. I agree that Borough Council should be doing all it can to comfort and support those neighbors who lost family and friends in Israel on October 7th. I cannot presume to know their grief. The problems that I have with this resolution, though, are this. First, there are several statements that I believe lack an acknowledgement of the road to these current hostilities. It states, whereas the conflict initiated in Hamas will result in the further loss of life, supports our residents in condemning the escalation of violence in Israel by Hamas, end quote. This resolution would have us believe that history and violence in the region started on October 7th. Apparently left out of this conversation are the 253 Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank that had already been killed by the IDF and Israeli settlers in the West Bank in 2023 before October 7th. Additionally, it would be wise for us to heed and acknowledge the words of the UN General Secretary, General Antonio Guterres, who said, quote, "The attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. With the Palestinian people being subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation during which they saw their land devoured by settlements, their economy stifled, their homes demolished, and their hopes for a political solution vanishing," end quote. Any conversation about the current conflict that does not consider the decades of ethnic cleansing and suffering experienced by the Palestinian people loses all credibility as public commenters on the current atrocities. Second, I see no mention of our residents and neighbors with family in Gaza, who numerically speaking have much greater odds of knowing someone injured or killed in the current hostilities that began on October 7th and are still ongoing. The disproportionate response by the IDF at this point has killed almost 16,000 Palestinians, including over 6,000 children, and has internally displaced approximately 1.8 million people. That resolution states that Council, quote, "acknowledges the suffering and the loss experienced by innocent Palestinians in the ongoing conflict," close quote. I would submit that acknowledging their loss and suffering is not the same as a call to support and grieve alongside them. Where is your call to recognize and alleviate their grief, sorrow, fear, anguish, and increasing lack of human rights? At best, it is buried behind the blanket calls to reject Islamophobia, which is not put on equal footing here as the call to combat anti-Semitism. Consider also, not all Palestinians are Muslim. There is a smaller but deeply historic population of Palestinian Christians that this resolution does not acknowledge, including those killed in the Israeli bombing of the St. Porphyrius Church, which is the third oldest church in the world, on October 19th. Finally, the resolution states, quote, "violence and terrorism can never be justified as a means to achieve political goals. Dialogue, negotiation, and peaceful resolution are the only viable paths towards lasting peace and stability. A just and lasting peace can only be achieved through a negotiated settlement." If Council truly believes these statements, then it will join the calls for a ceasefire to the current hostilities, to end the illegal siege of Gaza, and to call on our elected officials not to send any more weapons of war to Israel as it continues to terrorize the civilian population of Gaza. If you truly believe that a political solution is the only way forward, then the current military assault, siege, and bombardment of Gaza, as well as escalating settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, cannot be the solution. Since you have now waded into the water of this geopolitical conflict, I urge you either to revoke or amend this resolution, or to pass a resolution calling for ceasefire and productive actions by all parties involved, especially our government, the U.S. government, so that we will consistently move towards a just and lasting peace that the region so desperately needs.